very good afternoon to you all, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me enormous pleasure to welcome you all to yet another session of our ambassadors' lecture series. And many of you have in fact become friends of ISAS, and we would like to place on record our appreciation and thanks to you for the support that you have been giving us. Our profound gratitude is, of course, owed to our distinguished speaker this afternoon, Ambassador Federico Palomera of Spain. We were having a very pleasant chat at a reception in Shangri-La one evening when I invited him to come and do this for us, to give us this talk. And he, in fact, he accepted with a drop of the hat the challenge to present his country to what we would like to believe an informed audience, and that should actually be the stuff of which diplomats are made. So I'm very grateful, Ambassador. Ambassador Palomera has, as you would have seen in the flyer, a BA in law and an MA in international studies from the Madrid Diplomatic School. He joined the diplomatic service in 1979, and thereafter has served many places across the globe, as a matter of fact: Thailand, Egypt, Costa Rica, Australia, the United States, and the United Kingdom, which very nearly takes care of, which in fact is all the continents of the world, as we've just discovered. Spain conjures up many images in one's mind. The magnificent Alhambra, for instance, superb soccer, delectable paella, the bodegas, sherry, etc. And also a history that its people can be very proud of. There have been travails, of course, the Civil War, the various political conflicts, the economic crisis, but out of the chaos has always emerged the dancing star, and that's the beauty of Spain. But by a quirk of history, Spain never quite touched South Asia. The imperial Spain never quite. I'm sure the ambassador will explain how and why. But once, of course, the contacts were established, the relationships began to evolve. Those of us, well, I certainly have served in the Americas, and we have several ambassadors representing Latin America. We know how important Spain has been to its history and culture. So much so, I think, was it not in 1494 that the King of France had said of the Pope that show me the edict of God that has divided the world between Spain and Portugal. Anyway, Ambassador Palomera will speak on Spain's relations with Asia and South Asia, and I shall leave him to do that. But I would like to pay tribute to Spain for another role that it plays, which some of us scholars in ISAS may not be quite aware of, and this comes from my own exposure to the United Nations, which is in the evolution of the alliance of civilizations. Spain, along with Turkey, took the initiative in earlier, a few years ago, in creating this alliance, which aims at better understanding among the faiths, not just Catholicism and Islam, but certainly Catholicism and Islam, but also among other religious and ethnic groupings. And that ties in very nicely with the modest contribution of Bangladesh, links it to Bangladesh's own, our own flagship resolution, which was on the culture of peace. So here you had a situation where culture of peace resolution tied in with the Alliance of Civilizations in New York, and the Secretary General actually appointed a senior Pakistani diplomat, said Iqbal Riza, as the coordinator for the Alliance of Civilizations. Spain's contact, as we will discover soon enough, with India. India has been expanding. Pakistan has an active diaspora there. And Queen Sofia of Spain is viewed in Bangladesh as a great champion of microcredit. And she has very close personal ties with not just the country people of Bangladesh. Professor Yunus, microcredit and whole development, and it had been my privilege to be able to interact with her on several occasions in this capacity. Before I give the floor to Ambassador Palomera, I would like to extend everyone here greetings on the very first day of Ramadan, which falls today. This is not just a month where a Muslim sort of abstain from food and drink, but they also do that. That is more the form and rituals, as if it were, of the behavior. But what is equally important is the spirit of Ramadan, which is one of cleansing of the mind, body, and intellect, of restraint, and of the creation of fellow feelings among mankind, or humankind, as we now tend to say. Alas, the streets of today, Egypt or Syria or Afghanistan do not convey that kind of impression, but all of us do believe in believe in hope and take recourse to hope, because hope is what enables us to confront adversity, to renew our faith in life, and to be able to take on, to enable us to forge ahead. So with these few words, I would give you the floor, Ambassador, for your remarks.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all of you, and thank you very much, Dr. Chowdhury, for your presentation. As they say in Egypt, Ramadan Karim. I thank you all also for sacrificing this, your siesta time, to come listen to a non-event. Anyway, Spain does not have a toleration, reputation for tolerance, but it would be very tolerant if you would happen to close your eyes while I speak. It's something that I anticipate already. The question to what happened to the relationship between Spain and Asia has an answer as simple as it is vast. America happened. I would like to propose first the journey of the historical circumstances of this non-meeting and the reasons behind it. In September 1403, the Castilian diplomat, Ruy González de Clavijo, boarded a ship in the Puerto de Santa Maria in southern Spain in the company of the Dominican friar Alfonso Páez. His mission was shrouded in secrecy in order to avoid the very real dangers that he faced, and it was only 3 years later, in 1406, that he published a book giving a succinct account of his mysterious endeavor. He was in the embassy to Tamerlane the Great. The Madrid native undertook a narration of his troubles and fatigues in order to carry out the instructions of his sovereign lord, King Henry III of Castile, to meet with the great Timur Beg. It was the first attempt by the peripheral Castilian kingdom to enter the grand arena of international diplomacy. The objective of his mission was to secure the cooperation of the Asian conqueror in an attempt to check the advances of the Ottoman Turks in the Mediterranean. Another Spaniard of a different religious persuasion, Abdurrahman ibn Khaldun, had undertaken a similar mission on behalf of the Egyptian Mamluks a few years before. Ibn Khaldun was a native of Tunis, where his diplomatic life and intellectual endeavors took place principally in Spain, serving the Nasrid dynasty of Granada. These contacts on both sides of the religious divide were the first undertaken by natives of the Iberian Peninsula with an Asian potentate, and were only second to the first timid contacts of the French king Saint-Louis trying to secure the cooperation of the Mongols to support the kingdoms of the Levant, established by the Crusaders, and took place barely a century after the economic diplomacy of the Venetian Marco Polo to the court of Kublai Khan. Perhaps it is not strange that it were so, since Spain, in spite of her peripherality, had always been better informed of all the East than her European neighbors. The Reconquista, as the Christian kingdoms called their slow movement south, never turned into a state of total war, and the border between the Christian north and the Muslim south was always porous and allowed for many exchanges, mainly from south to north, as cultural influences traveled from the Cordoba Caliphate and the successive Muslim kingdoms towards the Christian heartlands. The Arabs were certainly in contact with other parts of the far-flung empire, and Indian mathematical innovations, for instance, made it quite early to the Iberian Peninsula. The work of Maslama al-Maghriti, a native of Madrid, like Rui González de Clavijo, and myself, developed the ideas of Indian mathematicians and the Persian and Arab followers like Ibn al-Khwarizmi, and worked along the astronomical lines developed in India. Spanish medieval literature received the early influences of the Indian compilation of tales and apologues, the Kalila Adimna, and the Persian and Indian stories of the Thousand Nights and a Night were known and appreciated in medieval Spain. Likewise, Spain knew the works of Al-Ghazali and Ibn Sina, and Eastern mysticism and Gnosticism can be seen in the life of work of the Spanish Sufi Ibn al-Arabi. Eastern medicine, mediated through Baghdad, was also practiced in Cordoba. As an example of how porous the borders could be, the king of Navarre, Sancho el Grasso, or Sancho the Fat, was treated of his morbid obesity in Cordoba by the doctors of the Caliph after his bulk made his throne crush from under him when he was deposed by a leaner claimant. Turned into Sancho the Fit, he proceeded to regain his kingdom with the help of his health advisors. In the 13th century, King Alfonso the Great, the 10th, we call the Wise, founded the School of Translators in Toledo to have the works of the Arabs translated into Latin and Romance, thus making Eastern thought familiar. King Alfonso X also wrote treatises on Czechs. That was an Indian and Persian name as well. But we have left Rui González de Clavijo in the court of Timur, bragging about his hometown. When the great Asian warrior tried to impress him with the golden domes of Samarcanda, the Madrid native retorted that the walls of his hometown were made of fire and they were built on water. As you can see, Kiyasu is not something that exists only in Singapore. The mission of the Castilian diplomat was frustrated by Timur's sudden death during his expedition to China, and Rui returned to Spain without having accomplished any permanent links with the Timurids. The beginnings of Spain's relationship with Asia were then quite promising, yet something intervened that would make Asia a continent that Spain turned her back on. What intervened was paradoxically the result of trying to find a shortcut to the rich Asian shores. In October 1492, Christopher Columbus met with the Americas while trying to steal a march of the Portuguese explorers and reach the Asian shores by sailing due west from the Canary Islands. The Catholic kings who had financed the journey tried to reach an accommodation with the Portuguese through the good offices of Pope Alexander VI, who was also of Spanish origin. In 1493, barely a year after the arrival of Columbus to the Caribbean, the Holy See dictated the bull Inter Cetera, granting to Spain all the territories west of an ideal line 100 leagues from the Azores. The brief bull, it was a pontifical breve, or a shorter bull, was also used to correct the vague geographical limits contained in a previous longer bull of the same name given by Pope Calixtus III in favor of the Portuguese that had granted to them all the territories and to the Indies, and was a way to take into account the claims of the Spanish monarchs, who were not too sure of the identity of the recently discovered lands. It seems it was Columbus himself who set the limits, and it is well known that Columbus, to the end of his days, believed he had reached Asia. A little while later, the Pope made a second bull of the nations called Dudum Siquidem, which means a little while later, and trying to correct the limits and granted to Spain the territories of the Indies that could be reached by sailing west. Nevertheless, the limits continued being imprecise, and the kingdoms of Spain and Portugal took the matter into their own hands, and by the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494 established a line 370 leagues west of Cape Verde, a correction that would give the dominion of Brazil to the Portuguese and the chance to the Brazilians of beating us in the World Confederation Cup just a week ago.
This is when the French king said, after Tordesillas, that Spain and Portugal.
Well, the only result of the several papal bulls were the Philippines, discovered by Magellan during his circumnavigation and settled later by Miguel López de Legazpi. It is said that Philip II, after whom the islands were named, envisaged the conquest of China from the islands. His knowledge of geography seems to have been as deep as that of his chaplain Diego de Covarrubias, who in his landmark Dictionary of the Spanish Language published in 1611 wrote under the entry, "China, a province of the Indies but recently discovered." The monarch dispatched an expedition to Cambodia, but it did not meet with any success, as the natives did not see any advantage in submitting to people that insisted on wearing a steel armor in a tropical climate. In any case, the Philippines were always considered by Spaniards more an extension of their American dominions than a new territory, and the economic and political links of the islands were more inclined towards Mexico and the Pacific Ocean than to the direct trade with the metropolis. Other historical circumstances also worked in favor of this longer connection. After the death of Kingdom Sebastian of Portugal in the Battle of Alcázar-Quibir, the Spanish king, Philip II, became the King of Portugal and also inherited the vast Portuguese domains in Asia. But the American bias of the empire was already well established, and the Habsburg monarchy would lack resources to stop Dutch encroachment in the Portuguese lands in Asia. The Dutch, who were also considered rebel subjects by the Spaniards, took advantage of the situation and started to take piecemeal the former Portuguese possessions from Malacca to the Indonesian ports, making the route across the Indian Ocean far less secure for Spanish shipping than the longer haul across the Pacific, itself a Spanish lake between Manila and Acapulco. Additionally, some Portuguese officials in Asia decided not to recognize the Spanish succession. It was the case of Macau, that never allowed Spanish crown officials to enter the colony, earning the sobriquet "Non hay otra más leal," there is no city more loyal. The Spanish Navy was hard-pressed enough trying to defend the vital Caribbean silver supply to Spain from the rebellious Dutch pirates. Not always successfully, Piet van Heen captured the whole treasure fleet in 1628 just outside of Havana in the Bay of Matanzas. And thus the Portuguese colonies in Asia were left to fend for themselves, causing an increasing disaffection on the part of the Portuguese and an added difficulty to Spanish presence in Asia. When Portugal regained her independence in the 1640s, the Spanish abandon to Asia deepened. Incidentally, this failure to defend the former Portuguese colonies would have important repercussions in international law. When the Dutch Jacob van Heemskerck plundered the Portuguese merchantman Santa Catarina in 1603, the Dutch Company of the Indies commissioned Hugo Grotius to defend their position. The young Grotius published the Law of Price and Booty and the Free Sea, theoretical backbone of the theory of freedom of the high seas, a theory that had been previously advanced by the Spanish lawyer Fernando Vázquez de Menchaca, one of the foremost representatives of the Salamanca School of International Law, notorious for constantly arguing against the best interests of the Crown. An initiative undertaken from this side of the world to establish stronger relations with Spain was also frustrated. In 1613, the Japanese nobleman Hasekura Tsuneaga left on a lengthy diplomatic mission, organized by his overlord the daimyo of Boju, Date Musame, with the tacit approval of the retired shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu. Characteristically, the Keicho embassy, as it was called, sailed east from Japan and spent more than a year on its way to the Spanish court. Tsuneaga, a Catholic, was looking for support for his overlord in the agitated feudal world of Japan and was in search of cutting-edge naval and military technology from the superpower of the day. Offering in exchange support for a Christianity that had already been established in Japan by no other than Saint Francis Xavier, also a Spaniard. Nevertheless, when Zuñiaga arrived in Spain, things had already changed in Japan. Christianity had been proscribed, and Japan had embarked in that long splendid isolation period that was only ended by the black ships of Commodore Perry, the commanding officer of the notorious Yankee vagabondo Pinkerton, the heartless lover of Madame Butterfly. So, a combination of respect for papal decisions, a lack of sufficient military resources, an independent theoretical mind. Grotius did underline that he was using Spanish arguments to defend his last point of view against the Spaniards, were initially responsible for a lack of presence. But there was more. The so-called cleanliness of blood laws, emphasizing the Cristianos Viejos, or old Christians, were both an affirmation of Christianity and a deterrent to commerce. Castile had been a dynamic frontier society on the march against the Muslim kingdoms of the south, and commerce had never been a very popular profession, taken up mainly by New Christians, a group that the new laws had rendered definitely unfashionable. Moreover, the American discoveries had an immediate effect on this psychological outlook. Spaniards would renounce trade in favor of another type of economy, more based upon the exploitation of natural and mineral resources of a land that did not have the same technological advances that the East did, and where the conquistadores had a bigger opportunity of acquiring the fame and reputation that they claimed was their first objective. This was always easier than arduous training with commercially savvy natives. So at the end of the period of ascendance of Spain, no important trading or diplomatic links had been established with Asia, and the Dutch and later the English conquest in South and Southeast Asia did not change the situation. Spain continued being more interested in her own American colonies, and the long period of imperial decadence that ensued did not allow for many diplomatic forays. The Philippines played the role of supplying first-grade Mexican silver to Asian commerce, perhaps the most lasting Spanish contribution to Asia, of course, apart from the chili pepper. Since Spanish coins were very widely used in China until the late 19th century. As a matter of fact, when Tecton Hospital was established here, it was done with a donation of 2,000 Spanish silver dollars. They were actually Mexican silver dollars. When in 1898 Commodore Dewey blasted away the Spanish fleet in Manila, Spain lost her only foothold in Asia and embarked in the discovery of her soul, what we call the generation of '98. We continued to have an emotional connection to the Philippines, and our policy there was centered mainly upon the preservation of a common history and Spanish culture. The early years of the 20th century were not too conducive to diplomatic activity abroad, and the civil war and the dictatorship did not make for a continued presence in Asia. These are the historical constraints. Let us see now how Spain has tried to follow the exhortation of one of the members of the generation of '98, the philosopher Miguel de Unamuno, who enjoined men to be rather parents of their future rather than children of the past. When democracy arrived in Spain in 1975, foreign policy changed in many respects, but one constant remained: there was no Asian policy. As previously, our foreign policy moved along two axes, Europe and Latin America, supplemented with very important relations with the US. In the 80s, the third axis appeared, North Africa and the Mediterranean. It was only in the 90s that some attention started to be devoted to Asia. Spain was having an increasing trade deficit, and a growing Asia economy seemed the place to go. So the first drive to Asia was motivated mainly by commercial concerns. Its main protagonist was the Institute for Foreign Trade, or IFEX, and its main instruments were the trade fairs, both exportagnias, fairs devised to promote exports, like the one organized in Beijing in '94, in Bangkok in '96, in New Delhi in '97, and Expo Consumo, a specific fair for developed markets, held in Tokyo in '98. Expo Consumo was actually more ambitious. It tried not only to broaden commercial interest, but also to promote the image of Spain. It was an exercise in soft power. It was not a single event. It was embedded in and the so-called Plan Japan, which included top-level visits. In '97, the Prime Minister, José María Aznar, visited Japan, and the next year the Majesties, the King and Queen, and later the Prince of Asturias also traveled to Japan. Besides that, the Spain-Japan Forum was created in '97 also as a place of dialogue not only for both governments, but also for companies, civil societies, and the academia. Ambitious as it was, the Plan Japan highlighted that Spain didn't have such a kind of integrated approach for the rest of Asia. So in the year 2000, Prime Minister José María Aznar presented in Parliament an action plan for the Asia-Pacific. Aznar highlighted that Spanish foreign policy was unbalanced, as not enough resources were being devoted to Asia, and that he intended Asia-Pacific to be one of the Spanish priorities in foreign policy. It was developed in two biannual plans, 2000-2002 and 2002-2004. These plans had a very clear economic bias, conceiving the 8 points it dealt with. 1, improving the image of Spain in Asia, always with the idea in mind that a good country image would help the Spanish products. 2, more high-level visits both ways. 3, positioning Spanish companies and products in strategic sectors. 4, trade and tourist promotion. 5, improving the information available to the Spanish companies for the Asian markets. 6, training specialists in Asia, something that did not exist in Spain. 7, investment promotion. And 8, improving access to Asian markets by identifying and abolishing existing barriers. In spite of its overwhelming economic bias and some coordination problems, the first Asia plan has some very positive aspects too. First of all, it had a psychological impact. Suddenly, Spanish policymakers, and not only them, became aware that Asia existed, that Spain was a negligible actor there, and that in a globalized world, being absent of Asia-Pacific was a sure passport to irrelevance. Even more, Spanish society started becoming interested in Asia, and politicians discovered that in any debate, they should be ready to answer Asian questions. During the term of this plan, Casa Asia was also created. We will come back to it. It was not among the objectives of the plan, but it became one of the most durable legacies of the period. The second Asia plan was more ambitious than its predecessor, and more importantly, it corrected the economic bias of the first plan and introduced clear objectives and benchmarks. It foresaw actions in political, cultural, and cooperation fields, plus, of course, the inevitable trade and economic area. The plan tried to create linkages to other policies promoted by the government, human rights, counter-terrorism, of the Alliance of Civilizations. Besides that, it paid more attention to the allocation of resources and incorporated the contributions of other ministries and institutions. The second plan had a strong impact. Two factors helped to it: a good economic situation and a growing awareness about the importance of Asia in the 21st century. Spain enlarged her presence in the area with the opening of new embassies, like in Afghanistan, in Bangladesh, and in New Zealand, together with a number of consulates and commercial offices. The King of Spain visited Vietnam, Thailand, and China during the period, and the Prime Minister visited China, India, and Japan. The master plan for the Spanish cooperation, 2005 to 2008, included 7 Asian countries: Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Cambodia, China, Philippines, Timor, and Vietnam. The third plan stressed the deepening of the political dialogue with the Asian countries and the importance of having a regular program of high-level visits. Some horizontal policies were also quite relevant in the plan, like development cooperation, disaster relief, gender equality, human rights, interfaith dialogue, and the new challenges to security. The third plan didn't accomplish all of its targets because of the economic crisis that started in 2007 and diverted the attention of the policymakers and, more importantly, the resources. Geographical action plans have played a role. They have helped to create a coherent vision of our foreign policy, but times have changed, and most likely the new concept will consist of a general strategic plan that encompasses all the foreign action and country plans that will link to that general plan. We turn now to South Asia. I see that you're not falling asleep. in spite of the siesta bias. The relations with India had a promising beginning in the 1980s. The King of Queen in Spain visited India in '82. Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi and Narasimha Rao visited Spain in '88 and '92. Prime Minister Felipe González visited India in 1993, and then followed 13 years with no visits, with an international relations is an eternity. Till 2006, when Prime Minister Rodríguez Zapatero visited India and had to cut his visit short because of a terrible accident in Spain. During all this period, Spanish relations with India have suffered from several deficiencies. They have been affected by the disproportionate attention paid to China and has cast a shadow on our relations with other countries, the lack of a clear idea of how to position Spain in India, and the inexistence of a clear image of Spain in India. This state of affairs could change soon. The King of Spain has recently made a very successful visit to India, where it has been seen that there is a scope to deepen our relations. We mentioned 3 areas that are full of promise. Defense, in which the capabilities of the Spanish defense industry fit very well with Indian needs. The Indian progress to develop partnerships and submarines correspond to the strengths of Navantia, Spanish defense naval behemoth. The Indian Air Force is planning to acquire transport planes and supply planes, which Spanish industry will also supply, and we could work together in research and development in industrial projects for defense. India is, of course, interested in Latin America, in Latin American markets, and ensuring the supply of natural resources. There will be room to think of establishing a kind of partnership for the region. India is the second Muslim country in the world, with 200 million Muslims. Therefore, India is very worried about Islamic radicalism. Spain has been one of the proponents of the Alliance of Civilizations and one of the main promoters of interfaith dialogue, and a partnership will also be established in the area. Traditionally, Spain has neglected cultural diplomacy in its relations with India, but this has also begun to change. The Cervantes Institute was opened in Delhi 3 years ago, and in such a short time, it has become one of the Cervantes Institutes in the world with the most number of students. Indian tourism to Spain has increased enormously in the last few years. The film Zindagi Na Milagi Dobara, partially shot in Spain, has been watched by 70 million people and has had a disproportionate influence in the way Indian public thinks of Spain. The Indians now believe that we are constantly awash in tomato sauce. One of the scenes of the film is the famous tomatina of southeastern Spain, where we do pelt each other with ripe tomatoes like crazy. The power of the Indian film industry has not been lost to Spain. An agreement between the 2 countries on the association of the film industries has just been signed. Spain is the honored guest of the Mumbai Film Festival this year, and the Fashion Week in Delhi will also be focused in Spain. The Foundation Cante de las Minas, a foundation dedicated to flamenco music and dance, has recently announced ambitious plans to be present in India. After all, one of the many influences that meet in the flamenco universe is of Indian origin, and the alchemists that have fused all the disparate elements of flamenco music and dance, Indian, Arab, Jewish, African, even Native American, the Gypsies, those alchemists, originated in India and carry the remnants of India in their long and hazardous travels. Our relationship with Pakistan is also well below its potential. The 2 sectors where they are most intense are police cooperation, particularly counter-terrorism, and consular affairs. There are about 70,000 Pakistanis living legally in Spain, over 50% of them in Barcelona, and probably about 15,000 in an irregular situation. It's an important figure, particularly when we notice that in 2001 the number of Pakistanis was less than 10,000, and that there had not been any historical or cultural links between Spain and Pakistan. There's no legal framework for the police and consular cooperation, but both governments are striving to get some agreements signed in these matters. Spain is aware of the importance of Pakistan and sees it as a key country for the stabilization of Afghanistan. Therefore, we would like to enhance our political dialogue with Pakistan. Since 2009, Spain is a member of the Group of Friends of Democratic Pakistan, launched at the silence of the United Nations General Assembly session, with the aim to extend support to the democratic government of Pakistan in efforts to consolidate democracy. As a token of its interest in the country, when Spain adhered to the group during the Donors Conference held in Tokyo in April 2009, she pledged $30 million of aid that was supplemented by some humanitarian aid on the occasion of the floods of 2010. In 2010, the then Prime Minister of Pakistan, Yusuf Raza Gilani, visited Spain, and we agreed a roadmap to create an association between both countries. Bangladesh and Spain established diplomatic relations in 1972, just after the independence of Bangladesh, but the bilateral relations were not eligible until 1996, when Bangladesh opened an embassy in Madrid. Spain opened an embassy in Dhaka in 2007. The Queen of Spain has a personal interest in Bangladesh and has followed with interest the rural development and the microcredit program. She has visited the country on 4 occasions, and visits that had a marked cooperation character and were centered upon microcredits, a cooperation tool developed by Mohammed Yunus, who received in 1998 the Prince of Asturias Prize. Her Majesty Queen Sofia, together with Professor Yunus, presided over the opening of the World Microcredit Summit in Valladolid in November 2011. Our economic relations with Bangladesh are still scarce. Our main import is textiles, we represent 95% of our total imports from Bangladesh, and our exports are few, which make for a huge trade deficit. There is no double taxation or protection investment agreement, and that's one of the reasons why our investments are close to zero. Immigration has become a problem in recent years. From there being no Bangladeshis in Spain at the end of the 90s, we have passed to 10,000 legal residents and a not yet defined number of irregular residents that enter mainly through Northern Africa. It has become one of the top issues in our political agenda. Another issue that has defined our bilateral relations with Bangladesh is cooperation. Our Master Plan of Cooperation 2009 to 2012 defined Bangladesh as a focused partnership country. In these countries, instead of having a large partnership, cooperation is focused in one sector or in several sectors with a common strategy. The concept behind is to have maximum impact in a clearly defined area. Priorities of Spanish cooperation in Bangladesh are the Dhaka district, Chittagong, and Rajshahi. Spain has also contributed through a UNDP fund of the Millennium Objectives to 2 projects, one on gender violence and another one on promotion of food security. We have always believed in multilateralism and cooperation in international fora. Therefore, from the beginning, Spain was in the international force in Afghanistan, where we are the 9th contributor in number of troops. Presently, there are 1,521 Spanish soldiers, plus 40 Guardias Civiles in the NATO mission to train the Afghan police. Since 2005, Spain has taken charge of the provincial reconstruction team in Bardis, one of the poorest provinces in the country. Spain has paid a very heavy human price for its participation in ISAF. 98 Spanish troops have been killed in Afghanistan. A great deal of our involvement relates to cooperation. Afghanistan being considered a priority country by our cooperation establishment. Between 2002 and 2012, Spain has financed projects for an amount of almost 500 million euros. Out of this, 370 million correspond to bilateral aid and the rest to multilateral aid. As other countries, Spain has plans to withdraw from Afghanistan gradually from now until the end of 2014. Spain is one of the support countries that took part in the Istanbul conference in November 2011, and in that capacity we have also attended the ministerial conference held in Kabul last June. We are considering to contribute to the founding of the Security Force of Afghanistan and send some technical experts. The Asia plans inaugurated in 2000 also put forward the idea to create links between civil societies to improve the mutual knowledge and the awareness that for most of the Spanish Asia, Asia was reduced to a very stereotypical image of China. An important instrument in this approach was Casa Asia, created in 2002 through an agreement between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Generalitat de Catalunya, and the municipalities of Barcelona and Madrid. It was founded with the objective of strengthening the knowledge about Asia and the dialogue between Spain and Asia. And in this spirit, Casa Asia organizes panels, exhibition, shows of Asian films, lectures. And besides these activities, Casa Asia disseminates news and general information about Asia, and follows closely events in Central Asia, triangulation, Asia, Spain, Latin America, and good governance. In the wake of Casa Asia, and inspired the same philosophy, we created the tribunas with several Asian countries. And the idea is, in this case, to put together people coming from different sections of society to debate on issues of mutual interest. Currently, we have tribunas with Australia, China, India, Japan, Korea, and the Philippines. The interest in Asia has thus spread beyond the action of the state, and a mutually reinforcing process has started. There are more information and studies available about Asia, and more people get interested in the continent and demand more information. Until the mid-90s, there were no Asian studies course in the universities, and Japanese and Chinese were the only Asian languages that could be studied on the bigger cities. Recently, studies on Asia are offered by the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid, the Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona, Pompeu Fabra and the Open University of Catalonia, and master's degrees on Asian studies are offered by the Instituto de Altos Estudios Empresariales, the University of Salamanca, and the Autonomous University of Barcelona. I hope not to have bored you too much, and hope I have shown that Spain has endeavored to pass from a meeting that wasn't to one that is, and that has the intention of continuing. Thank you very much.